Hi, this is Gabriel Chauri. Welcome to Game Design Thinking. Digital collectible card games, or Digital CCG for short, is an extremely popular genre. Despite having a long story, the genre explosion started with Hearthstone in 2014, and since then, as it happens with any popular genre, many games launch, trying to harness the popularity of it. Sadly, due to lack of innovation in both theme and mechanics, many of these games have died in oblivion, while most of the remaining and newly launched titles are being constantly compared to Hearthstone as a benchmark of the genre, thus decreasing the interest of players. In this video, we are going to analyze the main parts and system of Hearthstone, while also trying to define guidelines to innovate in a genre that appears to be stagnant, trying to replicate a single game. If you want, read the description below to find a one-page PDF summary of the information in this video. Let's start. Collectible card games have been around since 1993, with the introduction of the business and design model of Magic the Gathering. It was the first card game to introduce the concept of main decks and booster packs, in which players have the option to buy new cards to build better decks. It is not that optional though, because newly released cards tend to be more powerful than old ones, a characteristic called power creep. You can find more on the extra credits video that will appear in the card. Now, the change from analog to digital CCG brought many changes in the mechanics that would be difficult to implement in an analog card game. For example, keeping track of the cards played in a specific turn or playing with bigger numbers. Also, the actions are executed automatically, thus players don't need to enforce the rules themselves, which in turn diminishes the cognitive load on the player's mind. With the new digital era, most CCG started to fade, and switching to digital was the only option for many of them, while new games were created to fill the gap in the market. That's where Blizzard's Hearthstone appeared. Hearthstone is a free-to-play game developed and published by Blizzard. It was the first digital CCG developed by Blizzard, and as of today, is the benchmark for other digital CCG games. Hearthstone introduced many improvements to the CCG formula that are directed towards getting rid of gameplay steps in order to speed up the game and ease the cognitive load of players. One of the main improvements to this formula was not allowing players to take actions in the opponent's turn. It is a completely different paradigm than Magic the Gathering, in which, for example, players choose which characters to block in the opponent's turn. Hearthstone simplified tremendously the CCG core gameplay loop, creating a kind of template for many games after it, especially for card battler games. The core gameplay loop consists of the following. First, the player starts a new turn with a hand of cards. The player plays a card if it's allowed by the rules. Then, use the cards to attack and the turn's end, starting the same loop for the enemy. Then, a new turn starts, adding a gem that allows the player to play more powerful cards. As you see, the enemy can't interact and it has no way to disrupt the player's turn. Besides, each turn the relative power of the cards that the player can play increases, bringing the game to an end before it feels too long. This obviously reduces the player's agency and possibility of surprise, because when the enemy finishes playing his or her cards, there is not much that can be done. A way to solve this is to add agency in other parts of the game, like allowing players to discard some of their cards at the start of the game, or easy interactions, like pressing in any part of the field to watch dust particle rise. It is not much, but it is enough to keep players thinking that they are having a fair play against the enemy, and keep them entertained when it's not their turn. Hearthstone is composed of 4 types of cards: minion, spell, weapon, and hero cards. Most games follow a similar hierarchy of cards. There are cards that can be played that have an attack and defense that is deducted automatically every time the card attacks or is attacked. There are cards that have an immediate unique action, and there are other cards that can be equipped to a card already played to enhance their power. What is interesting is that this set of mechanics can be applied to any kind of aesthetic, like figurines or even a JRPG turn-based mechanic. This is why there is an increasing trend to include card-like mechanics in other contexts, like Slay the Spire, Trials of Fire, and many more have done. Card battlers consist of such robust systems that they can be applied in many contexts, retaining the core gameplay loop and interactions. Heck, it is so versatile that you can put anything on top of it and it will work exactly the same. It doesn't matter if it's medieval, fantasy, anime, or Plants vs Zombies. Now, to prove my point, I want to briefly show you 3 games that are somewhat different to Hearthstone, some more successfully far than others. Causa is a game developed by Niebla Games, released this year. The game gives an interesting overturn to the mechanic of discard at the start of the match. Powerful cards remain in the player's hand, who in turn has the option to sacrifice them to obtain Causa, the currency equivalent to gems in Hearthstone. So players generate their own gems. Despite adding this new layer of difficulty, the main loop doesn't change too much, and reading the Steam comments, many players compare the game with Hearthstone. Some in a good way, some don't. It is a fun game with an interesting turn in that mechanic. Kards is a World War II themed game, developed by 1939 Games, also released this year. The game has the typical cards with attack, defense, and some simple powers triggered in different situations. The game allows a mulligan, so players can change some cards at the start of the game like Hearthstone. One interesting innovation is the adding of a physical space called the front line, an intermediate line that is the main way to attack the enemy's base and win the game. The difference with other games that use physical space is that the front line is very significant to the game, because the player that controls the front line is the only one in a position to deliver a great amount of damage to the enemy. So it is important to know when to move the troops to the front line. A bad movement can ruin the whole match for a player though. Finally, Gwent is the well-known collectible card game born from the Witcher world. This game deviates completely from Hearthstone's or Magic's formula. Gwent is played in 3 rounds and a single set of at least 22 cards. One of the most important differences of these games is that all cards are important, because literally all cards can be played in a match. This is important because it reduces the total number of cards in a single deck and also gives more meaning to the link between deck building and gameplay. Also, it is important to note that Gwent is not a card battler. The natural question at this point is, why did I make this video? What is the point that I am trying to make? Well, to be perfectly clear, I think that Digital CCG lack innovation, both in theme and mechanics. Most CCG, as they are card battler games, rely heavily on variation of medieval fantasy, probably a consequence of the dominance of Hearthstone, and probably the consequence of the alleged target public. There are games that explore other themes like cards, but the examples of successful games are few. On the mechanic side, most collectible card games are card battler games and rely heavily on the same parts and mechanics as Hearthstone, or in some cases as Magic the Gathering. The innovation comes little by little, and is usually in system that doesn't influence the experience in a disruptive way. For example, changing how the player deals with powerful cards that require more gems to be played, or in how the gameplay area is distributed, adding a sense of physicality that is rarely satisfactory to the player, because it ended up more like a burden to players' turn rather than a highly strategic decision. I think that if digital CCG designers start to look at other genres beside the card battlers, they could add many ideas to the genre, like point systems or a sense of physicality that is meaningful and fun. Also, it could be useful to start looking to other themes beside the medieval fantasy, to give a fresh air to a genre that is mostly surviving due to a niche of players that consume new games in order to test if this is, finally, the game that will generate the groundbreaking innovation that this genre so desperately needs. Thanks for watching the whole video. Now, as promised, in the video description you will find the one-page PDF summary of this video, so you can review the information easily. I hope that this helps you in your current or future games. If you want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the bell. Also, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you, and have a nice day.